everybody, Muscle Car Campy in your house. Welcome to tonight's live feed. Here with a very special guest who'll be coming our way shortly. Just in case you're wondering, don't forget, if you're watching this for the first time, please hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss any of our cool videos coming up. We've got a lot of fun tonight. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. What's a muscle car? How that definition has really changed over the years. We're going to get into classic road tests. I got some of my favorite road test books here. Chevelle and SS. I got the great muscle cars compared. Because I've done a lot of road testing over the years, and so has my special guest, Evan J. Smith, also known as Revan Evan to all you people out there in YouTube land. Don't forget to check out his channel. But the thing I want to get into with the muscle cars is, besides what is a muscle car, how were they tested back in the day? Some of the results of the test varied widely. People think the cars were ringers. Some of them, if they didn't run the way they wanted them to, they think that they were sandbaggers. And that one magazine liked another one better, another brand. We'll get into all of that. But first I want to introduce Evan J. Smith, Revan Evan on YouTube.
What up, Camp?
And nothing much. Glad to see everybody's here checking in already. Evan, you're a little bit younger than me. What is your definition? A little bit. 5 years. Just 5 years. What's your definition of a muscle car?
All right. Being the purist that I am,
Yeah.
you know, I love stock eliminator, and I do love the classic muscle cars. To me, I kind of have two definitions. The original, intermediate body, big engine, you know, 390, 380 cubic inches or bigger, all the way up to 455, 460 in some cases in you know, the bigger cars, but the classic muscle car. But I think just like life evolves, that terminology has kind of evolved to fit the modern cars. Because, you know, technically a Mustang, a Challenger,
They were pony cars.
Cuda are pony cars.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's really only Ford's muscle car now, and people just kind of call it a muscle car. But I think where it gets sticky for me is these days, people will just call any old
car
two-door car
with a
a
V8.
muscle car. It could have been a 69 Skylark with a 352 barrel. People go, that's a muscle car.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And it's not a muscle car. It's just an old car. It's a cool car.
Yeah, a gigantic rusted out Bonneville with a 354 barrel. That's a muscle car. Well,
Right.
not really.
Basically, yeah. Like people, I think they've got away. They term anything from the 62 to 74 era like a muscle car just because it happens to be old.
Or even, you know, here's where it gets dicey to me. When you get into those 75 to 79 Camaros, Trans Ams, a Mustang 2, which didn't even have a V8 as a standard engine. You could get a Mustang 2 Cobra 2,
Yeah.
4 cylinders. Is that a muscle car?
No,
And
not in my opinion. Cool car, right? And that's where it gets sticky. Is in this world where everybody's so easily offended. If you tell somebody their car or a car that they like is not a muscle car, the negative connotation of it's not offends people.
And I can tell you, I have been the biggest hypocrite in this department when it comes to my channel. I would always say, well, 76 Trans Am's not a muscle car. I don't care if it's got a 455 and a 4-speed. It's not a muscle car. And of course, what do? I go out and feature a beautiful 455 4-speed 76 Trans Am last year for the 455.
Right.
And, you know, Grand Prix. Is a Grand Prix a muscle car? In theory, not really, but I went out and shot a 428 4-speed 69 Grand Prix, genuine 4-speed Grand Prix. And that's what hooked me on it. Is it a muscle car? Maybe not by the according to Hoyle dictionary definition.
Right.
But you know what? I found a place for it on the channel, and I'm glad I did. It's one of my best videos ever as far as views.
So Ed Holmberg chiming in our first question of the night. So it's a good one, so we'll jump into it. You mean my 77 Cutlass isn't a muscle car?
No.
I mean, they're cool, and they race them in NASCAR, and
Absolutely.
you know, I've seen them at the drag strip, and they accept the 455 O's pretty nicely. You know, or an LS.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, again, we're not out to ruin anybody's evening. You know, it's a tough. You know, when I look at because, and this we'll get into this in a little bit. I'm a voracious magazine reader. I've been reading car magazines since I was 10. I have almost all of them, in fact. I mean, I remember reading Road Tests, and one of my favorites was when Don Nicholson, fresh off the Pro Stock World Championship, tests a Mustang 2 King Cobra or Mustang 2 Cobra 2 with a 302 4-speed car. It goes like 17 flat. That's not exactly muscle car territory. So his crew chief then was John Cossey, who knows more about Ford engines than any 40 people else on planet Earth.
Right.
He goes under the hood, tweaks it a little bit, and it slows down. That's how bad things had gotten in the mid-70s.
Right.
So, you know, what are you going to do? I mean, that's life.
Well, then, like my dad had the '84 Monte Carlo SS, which was about as muscle car as you could get for 1984. I mean, intermediate body, and certainly not the biggest engine at 305, but it was a V8 with a 4-barrel nonetheless. And that thing ran like, I think, 1499 or 15. Maybe they ran 1599.
I'd say 15.
I think they were running 15.9s, 16.0s in the quarter mile with the air cleaner lid flipped over. I don't think I ever left the driveway and didn't flip the thing over and then flip it back when I got home.
I think the difference between those early muscle cars and, say, the Monte SS and the Grand Nationals and things like that, the modern muscle car era, what made cars, the 83, 84, 85 cars so interesting was for the first time in a decade, performance was actually improving.
Yeah.
It just kept going down and down and down. 80 and 81, the Mustang had a 255-inch V8. I mean, it was ghastly. I mean, it was just, you know, terribly slow, terribly uninteresting. You know, even when the 82 Camaros first came out and the Firebirds with the 305, man, they had like no horsepower.
Right.
I mean,
And every year it got better. Right? Like, look at the Mustang, 85, 86, 87, 3 years in a row where the car went quicker each time the new car was released. So it was like a reason to want the next new car and keep going for the next car. Of course, then after 87, performance pretty much in the Mustang world stayed the same. And then, you know, that was the last year for the Grand National.
Yep.
But the Camaro kind of...
The Camaro kept going. 93, you put the LT1 in the Camaro, Firebird, Corvette. Now you had a low 13 second car from the factory. All of a sudden they went from, well, at least in the case of the Corvette, the Camaro and Firebird were heavier, probably high 13s, low 14s. But like I said, now you have cars that are running with the factory muscle cars of the 60s. And they handled and they had air conditioning and had power, everything. So it was a big difference. And like I said, but for me, muscle car, you know, again, if the 64 GTO was the first muscle car, what was the 409 Chevy with a 4-barrel, dual quads, you know?
Well, wasn't it technically a full-size car?
It was, but then you had the 413 and 426 Max Wedge Mopars. They were intermediate size. They boasted had a 6-passenger interior, but they were really intermediate sized cars. But surely they lacked a lot that the GTO had. The GTO had style, it had panache.
Well, they lacked marketing. They were marketed to drag racers for drag racing, where I think the GTO and then the cars that really followed it, the 442, and they were marketed to young guys either coming back from the war or guys who were coming out of college and had a job as being a muscle car, where I think, like the 409s, and it was kind of like where the, there was definitely a different buyer even in the 80s, but the type of person who wanted the LX50 and the type of person who wanted the GT or a GT convertible, the little bit of flash, or as Colabelli says, our buddy Joe Colabelli, gawk factor, versus just the rawness. I was a sleeper muscle car guy, so when I laid my eyes on a 5-liter LX Mustang, to me, that was just, it catch me out.
And maybe because I'm a guy from New Jersey, North Jersey Italian guy, I like the cheese grater taillights on the GT and the side skirts and the front air vent.
Probably like the turbine wheels too.
Not a big fan of the turbines.
I'm a 10-hole guy. Yeah. Gotta have the phone dials.
So, again, you know, it's a constantly evolving term. I think we can agree that your 352 barrel Cutlass is not a muscle car.
No, it's a cool car and it can be souped up.
And yeah,
great
you,
hot rod.
you could put a 455 with a 4-barrel that makes it a hot rod. It doesn't necessarily make it an according to Hoyle muscle car.
All right, I'm gonna throw Jim into a tailspin here.
Oh no.
Yep. Muscle car era, 64 to 72.
Mm-hmm.
What about a performance intermediate wagon? Is it a muscle car?
Of course not.
I say it is.
Yeah, it worked. Well, first of all, there were none.
No, that's not true. You could get a 427 in a Fairlane wagon with a stick shift.
Yeah.
That's not a muscle car?
Well, yeah, but they sold like, and how many of them? One or two?
I don't care if they sold one.
I don't know.
I've seen them raced in stock eliminator. It's true.
Well, yeah, this is the same class in NHR that allows Edelbrock heads on the Fords to be stock. So, yeah, live your little dream. Live in your little world.
I am.
But
You gotta have superseded parts, man. They're 60 years old.
well, if they were that good, race something new.
Well, that leads us to a next topic. Are new cars muscle cars? I say yes.
Absolutely. If you are driving something that is really meant to be a performance vehicle, a Charger, Challenger, rest in peace, you know. But now I guess today was the big day. People drove the new electric Charger for the first time today. Those stories are embargoed, I think, till December 12th. I did not drive one. I kept my man card for now. But I will tell you, I have seen them running around Detroit. They look amazing in person. And this is a definite black mark on my soul. I've heard that exhaust system, the piped out exhaust. It sounds like the most badass hot rod you've ever heard, except you know it's fake. But like I heard one pull away from a traffic light. I'm like, whoa, what was that? And I realized it was the electric Charger that I had been looking at.
Right.
So,
all right, we got a couple comments. Ed Holmberg chiming in again. What about his Corvette? Ed, what year? I'm not sure. You got to remind me on that. And then NYS GTO. The last 442 was 1974 with 455. Inaccurate.
80. The 73 GTO had a 450.
No. 442 says.
Oh.
The 87 or 86 after the Hurst Olds, they did a 442.
Yeah, they had a 76, 77. Of course, they had
88.
88 was the G body. That was a 354 barrel.
Still a 442.
It was an Olds motor though, and it had 0 horsepower.
I know, but it was still a 442.
Yeah.
Marketed as a 442.
Oh, I'm not saying there wasn't one. What about the Corvette? I as a Corvette nut, I think the Corvette is a muscle car. It had all the best engines, and it surely weighed, until 74, 75, it weighed a lot less than any of the other muscle cars, 3,100, 3,200 pounds. So,
See, I call a Corvette a sports car.
It is a sports car. It's a sports car with muscle.
No doubt about it. Yes, you are correct. GTO.
Think about
45.
Think about it as a beautiful woman with slightly enhanced body parts. It doesn't make her less of a woman.
Nope.
It's just different.
Well, yeah. Some people say fake boobs. I don't say fake boobs because if you have an aftermarket cam, you don't say I have a fake cam.
Yeah, or a fake Mustang. Yeah, absolutely. You know.
Surely you speak of the Mach-E.
Well, I know I never do actually, and I never will. So I'm sorry.
All right.
But any more questions up there?
Yeah, I know Lee is being facetious when he says that's new city carpet is Lee Rudder.
Lee Rudder.
What about a strip Dodge van with a 360? That's a muscle van. And that was a sleeper van. That van was so cool.
Man, I'll tell you, this live is going off the rails quick.
That's all right.
But I will say, getting back to the real reason I wanted to do this, muscle car road tests. And this book has one of my favorite road tests of all time. It's the Chevelle SS muscle car book, 64 to 72. And what's really cool about it is there's a Roadrunner vs. Chevelle test from 1971, done in Carcraft magazine, and it was done by our dear late friend Steve Collison, Head-On Collison. And you know what I love about this, because people will see these road tests and quote them like they are gospel scripture, like Moses came down from the mountain and handed the tablets over. I hereby decree thou shalt not run slower than 1365 in your Roadrunner, blah, blah, blah. So here's the case. So Carcraft was Peterson Publishing. They actually had the horsepower to order some of their test cars. They wanted an LS6 Chevelle. Chevrolet said, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. So they sent them an LS5 Chevelle, and they said, we wanted a stripper. So they sent them one with air conditioning, automatic transmission, everything they asked, they didn't want.
Right.
At the same time, they had a 71 446 pack Roadrunner that they were going to do a comparison test to. Now, against the LS6 Chevelle, Roadrunner was a good test. Against an LS5 Chevelle with a hydraulic cam and 8.1-to-1 compression, not exactly, what the horsepower doctors ordered.
Nope.
How ironic then that they get the cars on the track and the Chevelle with a 331 rear and an automatic goes 1435 at 9708, wins class at the track and goes 3 rounds of brackets in the process. Whereas the Roadrunner with the great 446 pack only goes 1432. Now, this is the gospel, right? This is how it was. And then they talk about, well, then we added some timing and we did a little of this, a little of that, and miraculously the thing runs 1370s. Well, years later, when I was editor of Muscle Cars magazine, Steve Collison was writing stories for me. His first column for me, he talks about this very test. And Chrysler was so embarrassed by the performance of the Roadrunner, they actually flew somebody out from Detroit to California. Collison picks him up at the airport. They drive the car back to the hotel. A guy literally rips the intaking cars off the 440.
Right.
Goes through the whole thing, makes sure everything's working, jets everything, blah, blah, blah. Ladies and gentlemen, that's how the 446 pack Roadrunner went. 1371 at 101, 1378 at 101.46.
So the Chevy just showed up with the Super Tune, is what you're saying.
That's another question. Was it super tuned? 14.3 is pretty quick for a smogged out 454. But on the other hand, Bank Screech Turbo 400, those cars ran good. It was a lot of cubic inches. And, they had a lot of, Marty Shore, who was editor of Cars magazine, once told me, he said, almost everybody did cheater cars back in the day, especially Pontiac. Mopar had some, but he said Chevrolet never sent them because they were selling so many cars they just didn't care. He said they just basically sent whatever was coming out.
Well, the funny thing is that you say that is because even through our era of testing, and I predominantly tested the Ford stuff, but did get my hands on pretty much every car that went through our office. I ended up, if it went to the drag strip, I pretty much drove it.
Yeah.
And we got called to task a few times, people saying that, these cars were ringers and Ford did this, especially even up until I tested the most recent GT500 and went 1061 at 133. And that was a ringer car from Ford, and I'm like, first of all, Ford doesn't care. They care, but they don't care. The marketing team and all that, they're just happy to get cars out to the press. They're not super tuning these cars anymore and sending it to shops like back then and bringing in experts. You can't even hardly get in the computer. Of course, you could tune the earlier ones, but I can't even fathom that any of that went on. Now we did experience that one time.
But that wasn't a Ford car.
But that wasn't a Ford car.
That was Celine. I know the car you're talking about.
Yep.
The S351 that
You mean the S408?
may or may not have had a Kunz & Co motor in it. And that's what's really cool is that, like I said, people test these cars. And remember, these old cars were carbureted cars with fouled spark plugs sometimes. Sometimes they barely ran when the magazines got them. It's not like today where the cars come out. You'd have to pull 3 plug wires off to get a new car to foul its plugs. I don't even know how that could be a thing.
Yeah, but back then, let's say
it was commonplace, especially with a Hemi car or something with multiple carburation. You get stuck in Long Island traffic or California, LA traffic, you're going to foul the plugs.
Or if remember, these cars go from magazine to magazine to magazine, and they're not all performance magazines. So Cosmopolitan, the New York Times, you don't know who had their hands on the car before, and if it was idled around a lot or just moved, maybe it was barely driven for a week or two, and plugs fouled out. They got
Sometimes they would give a car out to a magazine for a video shoot with a model. It didn't have anything to do with a road test.
Yeah, or they could have put, like, you know, even back then they could have put the wrong gas in it when it needed, you know, high test.
Yeah.
And then to get to the track, now you're the next person to test that car and it's just not running good.
Yeah. So, I mean, always be careful when you're quoting magazine road tests, especially on Facebook. I see this every day. People are just like, oh, that was a ringer.
Oh, you're
that,
right, yes.
and that one was not a ringer, and this was slow, and blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of roll my eyes. Like I said, I know some of the people who tested these cars. I've heard some of the stories. You know, sometimes you just get a car that's really bad. Like, and if you quote a story, be sure you read the story, because, you know, like when they talked about some of the Hemi cars, they would get them with foul plugs, so they would change the plugs, and then while they're under the hood, well, we might as well rejet the carburetors, we might as well turn up the timing a little, and all of a sudden you have Jack the Bear, you know, a Hemi car running like a Hemi car should, but...
Well, and that's part of the problem with social media a little bit, is that you're reading a post, you want to chime in, but you don't really know. People will just blurt it out because there's no consequence. They're not going to stop at that point, go find some old road test or actually research something, and that post is long gone by the time you do that. But and what gets me is there are people out there who, I guess being a journalist, I'm not going to say something unless I can back it up with some fact. My opinion to other people isn't really that important unless it's right.
Certainly,
so I'm going to try to...
married to.
Well, yeah. So, you know, but people will just blurt the craziest stuff out. It doesn't matter if they're right or wrong. And then if you try to correct them, even in an educational way, you know, you're a hater, you're a jerk, you're...
Yeah. And I think there are two other things at play here, too, that back in the day, in the 50s and 60s, when they still had auto shop, in the 70s, they still had auto shop in schools. If you bought a new Roadrunner, the first thing you're going to do is rejet the carburetor, crank up the timing, you know, and make it run the way you thought it could run.
Right.
Nowadays, the average person buys a Mustang, or maybe he bought a Camaro. He's looking under the hood. Well, there's no distributor to turn. Like I said, you couldn't foul the plugs if you tried. So, you know, there are other ways to modify cars. But back in the day, if Cars Magazine wrote about, hey, you know, we added this much timing in that, we did this, well, that's the result.
And most cars today even come with the driver mod. They have a drag mode or some type of launch control where if you play your cards right, you can go to the track and replicate, as long as you got a good track and good weather, the performance that you see in the magazines or online.
And then there's the cars, I always give it the road and track and car life testing. Back in the day, they always tested with 2 people in the car and a full tank of fuel, plus test equipment, which added, some of these tests, they added 200-300 pounds to the curb weight.
Which magazine was it, even in our era, that would go to a drag strip but run backwards from the shut down there? Motor, yeah, because they wanted it, and it was cool because they want every car to have the same traction. They don't want to, like, we always look for the best ET. So, and granted, we were using predominantly Englishtown and Atco, so we had great drag strips. But like, if our magazine would have been based in Kansas or somewhere at altitude, and we're in the middle of the summer, like, we wouldn't have had the performance that we did. We were blessed by our geographical location and the fact that these tracks worked with us. They loved having us there, so we always had great prep.
Being a performance magazine, it was our job to show people how to get the optimal performance out of their new Mustang or out of their new Camaro,
we weren't just doing
out of their new Corvette.
General testing.
We were going there to have a party. It was quite a lot of fun. But on the other hand, we were doing this to make sure that people knew. You know, I'll never forget, and you know this test was, I think, a 95 Cobra or 94 Cobra Black. We tested it in Englishtown. I mean, it was 100+ degrees temperature. That doesn't include that glorious New Jersey humidity. And, I mean, you could barely stand at the starting line and breathe. So this car was running slow. So we talked about...
Let me interject. What's funny about that one is I believe we did the 94 at Cobra on the most brutally hot day, and then when we tested the 95 Cobra, one was red, one was black. It was literally like the day after it snowed, and we had ice or snow from the side of the track on the intake manifold. So it was literally a complete contrast. So we depending on what time of year we got a press car, really also determined how quickly it would run.
Yeah, but to be fair, we always told people it was 7 degrees with
we put it in the story.
Yeah, I mean we did a comparison test or a bunch of shootouts at ATCO one time where it was like 20 degrees out, and somehow that track, again, rest in peace. Hopefully someone will buy it and open it up. Anybody out there with some money, go buy ATCO. And somehow that track, no matter what you did, always hooked. It could be 20 degrees out. That track.
It really did. We had I think that day we had the '99 Cobra prototype that Jim Diamore got us.
Yes.
We had with a gear in it,
which
we were very excited about.
We had a '98 Camaro, which was the first LS1 Camaro that we ever tested. 6-speed.
Yep, and that went 1289, if I remember, like 105.
And a Corvette fixed roof coupe.
1266.
1266.
I'm like Bernie with that stuff.
You are. But that car, that car weighed 3,100 pounds.
Car was a rocket.
Oh my
we were
God.
We were giddy that day. Those cars were running. I mean, 12 sounds like nothing now, but back then.
But I can remember testing. You talking about the quintessential Jersey Shore Mustang GT? I got a '92 Mustang GT press car in with an automatic, and it went. It did have the 5-spoke ponies. It was beautiful. But it went 15.3 at about 89 miles an hour or something, or 90 miles an hour. It was pathetic. I was like, what's all the fuss about here? This thing is a lump. Now, I wasn't made aware yet of the put it in low, shift into second, and pull it back into low.
You had to do the AOD shuffle.
The AOD shuffle, just doing it, just hearing about it made me cringe. And when finally I learned that that's what you had to do, which was insane.
Yep, NYS GTO. He says he's old school. If he bought a new Mustang, the first thing he'd buy was a bag of ice. 10-minute tune-up, man. It was cheap performance.
Yep. Now, here's something. Is a Corvette a muscle car? Now, I remember when I started at Vet Magazine, and the first cover story I ever wrote, we tested a 1969 tri-power Corvette against an '89 6-speed Z51 Corvette at Raceway Parking. For the most part of the day, my job was to sit up in the tower, because back then you had to sit in the tower and actually run the clocks manually like you would on a regular race day. Later on, we were able to start them from the starting line, but we first get there, everything is set up. Somebody was already in the tower, and the editor of the magazine said, "Come on, hop in the car. We'll make a pass down the track."
Right.
And I had never been in a tri-power 411 geared '69 Corvette before, and on just BFG radials, which is what every Corvette seemed to have then and now.
Right.
It went 13. It was either a 23 or a 33 with two of us in the car, and I mean, I was just like, this is just the greatest moment of my life. I was just like, so when you ask, is the Corvette a muscle car? That sounds pretty muscular to me. And the funny part of that day, the new car ran a 14.0, which we were totally geeked over too, because this was, and later on I've seen a lot of those cars when they were stopped getting a bunch of press cars before they went to the C5, before they went to the LT1, L98, 6-speed cars going into the mid to low 13s.
You hear that chime means somebody's in front of my house.
Oh, okay.
That's my ring doorbell thing.
Okay.
But by the way, NYS GTO is Gary Rudder.
Oh, hey Gary, how are you?
What's up, Gary?
So again, we've tested. Especially when I was editor of Super Chevy, I tested a lot of vintage muscle cars. There's another mixed bag for you. They're all stock, and sometimes they're a little less stock than you would hope.
Right.
These guys would not have these cars tuned properly, or it was just not good. I mean, I just did a video, and I would like everybody to watch it on a 420 SS 427 68 Impala convertible.
That car was neat.
Yeah, 385 horse, one of a kind, red with white seats, but the rest of the interior was red. The dealer swapped it out. But I remember when we tested Adam Landolfi's car. He tested it, and that car with him in it had to weigh 4,700 pounds.
Right.
And he had a 427 4-speed 68 Impala that it just not fast. I mean, it was a mid-15-second car. You were hoping for more, but it just sometimes road testing doesn't go the way you like it. So did I make up a number? No. This is what it ran. It ran what it ran, and you know, when the time we were testing at Carlsbad, the time we tested it, we had an S351 Celine, and we had a 96 GT Mustang, the 4.6 5-speed with the 248 A package, the content delete. God, we must have made 60 passes on that car trying to get it to go into the 14s. You know, it was just...
We got it, though, at the end of the day.
14,995, maybe? I mean, it was just like... So this is what the modular engine's all about, huh? I mean, we were just terribly disappointed. That was like the worst feeling in my life. We couldn't get that thing to run anything. I mean, it was... But we did run at Carlsbad, which was a glorious, glorious Southern California
What a cool track. Yeah, that was
I
neat.
mean, old school to the max, where they hung the Christmas tree up with wire and cranked the wire up to get it to stay up in front of you, and anchored it at the bottom to make sure it didn't move. Just classic stuff.
So we're going to see some, let's switch gears a little bit to modern muscle. We're going to see some modern muscle on the Muscle Car Campy channel.
Well, we already have. If you go back, one of my personal favorites, a 1989 20th anniversary Trans Am. Not with the Buick GN motor, not with the GNX motor. It was its own weird Pontiac. It was a Buick V6, but it had Pontiac heads, had a different turbo rather, different crank, different rods.
Most people just think it was the Grand National engine.
That's what everybody thought. In fact, I actually talk about that in the video, and somebody watched the video and said, "I'm so glad I said the whole thing was myth busting, and how that was not the Grand National motor or a GNX motor." And guys, it's so cool when they put that Buick Grand National motor in those cars. And I'm like,
what about like evolution of the Coyote, evolution of the Challenger from 08 or 09 to the end? Like that would be like cool for you to go through like evolution of a modern muscle car.
Absolutely. I love all muscle cars, and you know, my goal is to start doing more modern, starting with like 3rd gen Camaros and Firebirds, 4th gens. I found a 4th gen Camaro Indy Pace car that was actually a festival car at the Indy 500. He has a picture of Dale Earnhardt in the car somehow, or something. It's like one of those cars. But I was looking at it, it had some weird, freaky interior that wasn't a factory interior. It was like, no, that's because this was only for the festival cars that we used at Indy, and this was one of them.
Right.
So, you know, all kinds of stuff. You know, think about it. What could be, you know, an '87 Mustang LX? That's a muscle car now. That's fair game to me.
Now, what do you guys think out there? What are some cars that you'd like to see Campy do on the channel, on the modern side of things? I mean, there's endless old muscle. You've done AMXs, you've done 442s, you've done...
And there's still a lot of them I want to do. There's a lot of cars I haven't gotten to yet that either I have plans to do them, they're apart, they're this, they're that. You know, I've got a guy with a...
Ed called you out. He said 89 isn't exactly modern. I'm with you, Ed. I was really talking about the current muscle cars on the channel. 89 is...
That was like last week.
89, yeah.
89. Oh my God.
I was like in high school.
Ed, what are you trying to say here, buddy?
Kind of. Ed's got a lot of muscle cars,
Yeah.
man.
89, your girlfriends are in high school. You weren't in high school.
oh man, you can't be throwing me under the bus.
Anyway, no, so yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff we got to get to on Muscle Car Campy, especially like you said, now, you know, the Challengers are out of production, the Chargers are out of production, and people don't realize, you know, Hellcats, Red Eyes, Demons, Demon 170.
I've been egging you to do like top 10 engines per year, like, or top 5 engines of each muscle car, like year, 60, starting at like 64, 5, 6, like go through the best engines of the muscle car era, like what made them the best, not just the most horsepower, but like this, like get into a little bit of like design on each engine, like intakes, carburetors, you can do a whole thing just on hood scoops and multiple carburation.
I have one video I'm doing on custom wheels and stock wheels from the 60s and 70s. What was the best?
See, that would be a cool one.
You know? I mean, here's
Keystone Classics.
Yeah, one of my personal favorites. I mean, here it is, the Car Craft store. They put Traeger SS's on the Chevelle. They changed wheels on the Roadrunner. I mean, it's kind of a... Actually, they put Traeger SS's on the Roadrunner, too. They must have been a big... must have been
advertising.
Must have been advertising the Car Craft that month.
Yeah, but you could go in so many directions with your channel.
Oh yeah.
As opposed to just reviewing particular cars, because I think it is called Muscle Car Campy, so it's really your opinion on muscle cars. I think people out there would want to see like your take on the different aspects of muscle cars, not just the car. Don't be the car to star. Like, we want your opinion.
Well, and since my opinion is the only one that matters to me, just ask my wife. I know there's a lot of cool things.
Campy's favorite saying is "Me loves me."
Me loves me.
That's Terry's one.
I love myself. I think I'm grand. I go to movies and hold my hand.
All right, you're gonna have to leave my house now.
This is another cool test. This is one. This is one that people like. Great muscle cars compared. I don't know if anybody can see this. It's a Z28 Camaro being tested against a 302 Mustang notchback. And that's, you say, well, what's so unusual about that? Well, the engine in the Mustang is a tunnel port 302 Trans Am motor that they stuffed in it for a comparison with a Camaro, and I think the Camaro may have had it had the dual quad intake assembly, rear axle, blah, 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 Coney shocks, exhaust headers. So it's pretty cool. When you look at the numbers, the Mustang ran 1396 at 106 miles an hour. I mean, Cobra Jets didn't run 106.
Right.
And the Z28 ran 1377 at 107. I mean, but where else, again, these books are so cool, where else are you going to read a road test like that where they were testing a Mustang with a real Trans Am engine?
Oh yeah, and then here's where you have to like look at the details. So like in a 5-liter Mustang, right, Fox body Mustang, you've got I think a 335 first gear, and then a 225 second gear, right? So you have a lot of gear multiplication out of the hole. Even with 308s in the back, you had a good overall gear ratio. The Mustang had a 232 first gear. So that's literally like taking the Fox body and starting in second gear and going second, third, fourth through the quarter mile. Even though it's a 4-speed, you had like, basically you were probably crossing in third gear with a 119 third gear and a final drive. What is the final drive ratio? It's showing a 391. So even though it has 391s, like that car was probably miserable to launch.
Oh, you needed 488s.
Yeah,
especially with a 302.
Well, it's the 232 first gear. You're in first gear until freaking 300 feet out. You got to milk the clutch, and then you have auto wheel speed. So that the 60-foot time was probably horrible if it even says it.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, so
I don't think that was even a thing.
I mean, at 106, the thing might have been able to go 1250s pretty easily, but it was probably horrible to launch.
Yeah, 106 miles an hour, 107 miles an hour. I mean, my Mopar was going 13.2 at 103.
Well, I went 13.3 at 105 in Fairlane Bob's, Fairlane on,
bias plies.
7-inch bias ply tires. So that ET is not representative of what that car could have done.
No. And speaking of,
I'm defending the Mustang here.
Speaking of bias ply tires, by the way, I've got some videos set up that I want to do coming up on some pure stock cars that are in not too far from me here. One of my favorite videos I did was a guy with a 350 horse 396 Nova SS, which is extremely rare. People don't realize how rare that car is. And he now has a 396 375 horse car with the L89 aluminum head option. And he's got that thing running like you can't believe. So I'm going to be featuring that car soon. There's some LS6 cars around. So these are pure stock. These aren't your factory appearing stock tire cars with 560 cubic inches.
Right,
These
pure
are,
stock.
yeah, the pure stock cars run basically 60 over. Al, you're not allowed to have the giant cubic inches, but it's all about the tuning and really, it's amazing what these guys can do anymore on those little bias ply tires.
Well, all right, let's go to the comments here. Dan Boyd is just chiming in with a bunch of comments. He's got good ones. Do a 3-valve GT, R code 427, my all-time favorite. Psy. I just kind of did a race car version of that on my channel, Revan Evan. If you guys want to head over there after this to see some cool videos. And he says the 67, 68 Cougar styled wheels, which, those are nice looking wheels. And then before I hand it back to you, I think you should hook up with Gary because he does have that almost all stock 65 GTO that he races. And that would be a cool car for your channel next time you're up in Jersey. Connect with Gary.
Sure.
And do, he said he races it in pretty much NHRA 1965 trim.
Wow, very cool.
So that would be like pretty neat.
Yeah. Dan, I mean, I hope you saw the Cougar 428 Cougar video, with the 427 Cougar video I did about a year ago out of Florida. Really cool car. I did the video in February. A lot of people don't realize the 427 was the last, the Cougar was the last place Ford put a 427 engine. And it was the last project that Jack Roush worked on when he was an engineer at Ford. So, it's pretty exciting to think, and I'm with you, Dan, those Cougars look like nothing else on the road. I think if I was buying a car in 67, 68, I probably would have gone with a Cougar instead of a Mustang, as long as I could have got the good motor.
Well, you like highway headlights is life for you, so.
The hideaway headlights in the electric shaver grille, the sequential taillights going across the back. I mean, it was just a great looking.
You need a moment?
No, I'm good. Maybe a cigarette, but no. They were just great looking cars. I mean, and it was much nicer on the inside than the Mustang. But the Mustang was great too. It was fabulous with all that, especially if you got the aluminum panels in the interior. I mean, it was a glorious. How do you buy a car in 1967? You want a GTO.
Oh my God! Between figuring out what car and then what options,
yeah,
like my head would be spinning.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a family, maybe you don't want a Cougar or a Mustang.
Right.
So you want a GTO. Do I want a GTO or do I want a Chevelle? Or do I want an Olds 442, which was definitely a muscle car in 66, 67, or a Buick Grand Sport, fast with class. I mean, all cool cars. I mean, we haven't even gone over to the Hemi side of things yet.
Well, back then you spent more time with the order sheet compared to today, where you spend more time with the finance manager.
Well, you have to. You got, today the car loans last longer than the muscle cars of the 60s actually lasted.
Pretty much.
If you got one up to 100,000 miles, you had done something, but the rust would have eaten it away.
Well, people are talking about the price of new cars, and obviously it's skyrocketed over the last 10 years. And personally, I blame banks and credit unions, because if we only had 3-year loans, these cars would still be affordable. It'd still be cheap. The fact that you could stretch your payment over 7 to 10 years has allowed car companies to just go hog wild with pricing.
Average car payment now is like $775 a month.
Yeah, which is just out of control.
I can't even. I would choke. I would rather garble Drano.
People do it every day. Regular people just walk into a dealer and sign up for.
Man, of course, I'm also the guy who bought an '84 Corvette in '86 and was paying like 18% interest on a used car loan, and my bank note was $387.45 a month.
I remember the car. I couldn't tell you the interest rate, but I remember the car payment on my Fox bodies, $178.55.
Yeah, I was paying, like I said, almost $400 a month in a car payment when I was only making $300 a week. I was paying rent. And
right.
I was an idiot, but you know what?
Well, I don't know if Lee Rudder's still watching, but I bet you he had one of the more affordable LXs of the time, because he had essentially a stripper car. But I wonder, at what point did he pay it off versus how many mods it had?
Dan, we will tell you, Dan Boyd is putting up on here how that some weird 70s post-muscle cars. The Grand Am, I do know of somebody with a 455 Grand Am. Going back and forth, I'll probably get to that guy's house because he has all kinds of cool cars. Now, again, that's one of those ones where I have to sort of fall on my sword a little bit, because I'm not a particular fan of the look of those Colonnade cars. But on the other hand, you know what? It's my channel. I can put on what I want. If I want to do it, I do it. And like I said, I'll just.
They're unique.
They're beautiful on the inside. There's, you know. And
Wrap around dash.
Oh, beautiful interiors. And I always joke that the Colonnade cars in '73, they're more aerodynamic going in reverse than they were going forward. But, you know.
Certainly uniquely designed.
Yeah, yeah. Although I will say that '74 Laguna was a mean looking car, especially in NASCAR.
I like the Grand Am.
Grand Am was interesting. I'm not a big fan of the Pontiac.
No.
I gotta say, I like the Laguna better.
Laguna S3 is pretty cool. Plus it has swivel seats.
Yeah, my favorite Colonnade probably '76 442. I do like that body style.
Right.
Even though again they lack some horsepower.
Yeah, '77 Can-Am.
Woohoo!
I'm with Big Hank.
I remember when those cars were in dealerships new.
I don't. I was too young.
Oh, I was 16. My cousin had gotten his license, and we were gonna go. He was an only child, so I thought maybe he would get one. His dad was talking about maybe getting him a car. And we're like, let's go check out the Grand Am. And what's really sad is, you know, as you know, they, you know, the mold for the rear spoiler broke, and rather than fixing it, you know, it was done by an outside company. It was done by Jim Wanger's company instead of
On the Can-Am?
on the Can-Am.
I didn't know that.
It was his idea, and they basically said, you know what? Too many of these Grand Am dashboards are going out the door for the Can-Am. Just the spoiler broke, forget it, it's over. And that was the end of the Can-Am. A partial year, 1 year only thing. They advertised the heck out of it. It's a good-looking car. By that time, they had really.
What really differentiated the Can-Am from the Grand Am?
Different grille. It had a shaker hood. It had stripe package. It had rally.
It had the shaker and the
but-
stripes.
Yeah, but it had the.
Did it have honeycomb wheels?
No, it had the rallies, but it had the. It did have the Grand Am dash inside. That was, you know, and the amount of Grand Ams, probably same dash that was in a Grand Prix. I could be wrong, but you know, they pulled the plug on it way too early. And again, it had the Trans Am, the 6.6 Pontiac Trans Am motor in it too, so that was a good motor to have.
Right.
You know, definitely. You know, it's a shame when they went away. Another funny thing, talking about odd Pontiacs. This is one car I like. The Pontiac Grand Prix 2+2. From it was the same as the
80.
yeah, the same. No, the 80. What the 86?
86.
Maybe.
See, I thought they were ugly.
No, they're not attractive. But
Compared to the Monty SS.
but considering what it was the modern It was a modern Superbird. They needed to go faster in NASCAR, so they put a different nose on it and a different back window because that's what you had to do to race them. And I remember people say they were only sold in the South, and I call BS on that because I remember going to Park Pontiac in Jersey City. Had like 4 of them on the lot.
Yeah, I thought they were sold everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, not counting like modern cars like the GT500 track pack or something that's made for the track, weren't the Monty SS's and the 2+2s really, in my mind, they're the last cars that were ever built for racing, like for homologation for the body to be used in a racing series.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, certainly like the current Ford GT was built to be a race car in that sense, but where the manufacturer changed the body just so it could be competitive in NASCAR.
You mean the NASCAR Mustang isn't actually a Mustang?
I don't want to break it to you, but no. The Camry is, though.
I was wondering where I can go out and get one of those V8 powered rear drive Camrys.
Speaking of big news in the Toyota front, Toyota 2025 will be the last year it's involved in, at least for now, NHRA drag racing. They're pulling all their sponsorships out. I hope that's not a bad sign for the performance or the racing industry, but companies come and go. They spend a lot of money in a short period of time. It's pretty classic that companies do things like that. It's a shame for the Toyota sponsored racers, and you know, a lot of people kind of rag Toyota for their involvement, but they bring a lot of money to motor racing, and I like watching motor racing. So
it takes a lot of money to go racing anymore, and you know, the government has the manufacturers, the auto manufacturers, jumping from one foot to another. I don't know what, you know. Everybody's like, oh, we got the Trump administration's coming back, so they're going to relax the CAFE standards and the electric vehicle standards, and that the car companies are actually telling them not to, because they've spent billions of dollars coming out with these electric things.
And they want to be able to sell
They
them.
want to be able to sell
But
them.
the buying public, in my opinion, and from what I see, not really my opinion, I mean, Tesla, home run, right? Because what Tesla did, not to get it off topic too far here, but they created a really hip, cool brand. Kind of like when I was living in Jersey, and now you see it down here, like every jabroni had a 3 Series BMW.
Yeah.
You would just, that was the American dream in New Jersey in, 2006 was a 3 Series BMW.
Yeah.
And that's the hipster car now, is a Tesla. And
It's now.
but nobody else can capture that magic.
No other electric car is, and it's like it's the same as you said. If I know people who would rather walk to work than buy a new Cadillac or a new anything that wasn't a BMW.
Yeah.
Same thing with Tesla people. Somebody come out with an electric car goes 1,000 miles on a charge, they'd still buy the Tesla. It's the best. I saw a story in Car and Driver today. The Model Y is like the best-selling car in about 7 different states. And that includes crossovers, trucks, SUVs. They did like the top 3 selling cars in each state, and the Tesla S or Y is number 1 in a host of them, which is a little frightening.
All right, let's get back to muscle cars.
Let's talk muscle cars.
What do you guys want to know? Anybody out there got a comment, question for myself or Jim? Because we got about 10, 12 more minutes and we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah. If you could, here's one.
Oh.
Here, I'm going to ask you this, Ed. Car and Driver did a road test. Chevelle SS396.
I'm going, he's not. Ed, I'll be at PRI.
383 Super B. 69 Cyclone Cobra Jet. 428 Cobra, Ford, which is, everybody calls it a Torino.
Why did they screw up all the pictures though?
They messed up. This is not my man. Go call Car and Driver circa 1969 and tell them they screwed up.
Boy, the copy editing was horrible on that one.
Yeah, and a 426 Roadrunner.
You're asking me which one I would want?
Which one would you want? If you
Oh,
guys,
God.
you guys are all out there, what would you want? You got a choice of
This is a hard one. This is confusing.
a Hemi Roadrunner, a 383 Super B, I guess that's a Ram Air 3 GTO Judge, Cobra Jet Cyclone, Cobra Jet Cobra.
It's just like the best of 1969.
Oh, I know.
There's no way to pick.
A 383 Super B or an SS396 Chevelle. Now I'll tell you, this is Muscle Car Campy, my 2 favorite bodies that year. And I'm a Mopar guy in a lot of ways.
The fastback Ford
Fastback Ford,
/
Mercury, but I love the GTO and the Chevelle that year. 69 to me is the best looking Chevelle ever. I mean, again, what car would you buy in 1969?
Yeah, I can't even
You
decide.
can't even decide.
Because every one of them has attributes. So, like, it's almost hard not to pick the Hemi because, it's a Hemi.
Yeah.
But the Roadrunner is definitely not the best looking car. The GTO is probably the best looking, and the Cyclone, to me, are probably the 2 prettiest.
I love that fastback roofline on those
Yeah.
intermediate Fords in
That's
68,
wicked.
69.
But,
So
Chevelle's
great.
classic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, who was it? It's NYS. I was asking, the Chevelle was a 350 horse car, which remarkably, with 10 1/4, a 325 horse Chevelle, by the way, I'm sorry. And it ran 1441 at 97. That was getting it for one of those cars. That was about as good as a 325 horse Chevelle ever ran. Again.
Yeah. Gary's talking about the Stage 1 Buick.
Stage 1. Nice car.
What year was the first year for the Stage 1?
69.
69?
Yeah. Great motor with a 400. Then it was the, 360 horse, wink, 70. And, people, there's a car that, again, it was so underrated, now it's overrated. It's like, I always joke, I said, it's like the Grand Nationals of the 80s. They were fast, but they were not nearly as fast as the legend would have them be.
Unless you're Jason Line running it in stock eliminator.
Well,
they
there's
went
that.
like 992 or 980 something in C stock automatic with a 70 Stage 1 Buick GS, almost like I think they might weigh 4,000 pounds at sea.
Jeez. Well, let's look at some of our answers here. Big Hank, he says 396 if it was the 375 HP. Dan Boyd, sports roof. Yep. NYS GTO, that's impossible. Dan Boyd wants the. Well, wait, you want the sports roof. You want the Ram Air 4? I might take it, okay. Big Hank, 69 would be a 427 Camaro. Do you know, here's one, people always joke about the 427. How many cars was Chevy selling? They sold more 427 Camaros in 1969 than Plymouth sold Hemi Cudas in 1970.
I believe that.
I mean, it wasn't even a regular production option yet. They sold more of them. I mean, again, GM was so worried about goofy stuff like, government hitting with antitrust legislation.
And Mopar was worried about, like, what cool color name can we come up with?
Yeah.
Flashy color. If you wonder, I smashed my finger, so I'm fumbling over here with a bag of ice trying to keep my finger from not swelling up.
What a maroon.
It happens.
I did a car, it's so funny because, you talked about Mopar. The other, a couple of weeks ago I shot a 383 powered Dodge Dart, which is a pretty uncommon car. I think there were 991 built with a stick. And again, Dodge had this thing, they would put a high performance engine in virtually anything. I mean, they couldn't offer the car with power steering. It had a garbage exhaust manifold because they didn't want to have to, they had the way it came down the assembly line and the engine dropped in. I mean, it was a mess. God, did they just, in 69 they offered a 440 in the Dart and the A-body Cuda, dirt. I mean, these were completely, economy cars. The Dart was an economy car. It was called a compact, and they're putting 440s in it. I don't even count the Hearst Hemi Darts, because that was just a race car. But for goodness sake, man, I mean, Dodge, you got to give them credit,
That's a whole nother topic that we should get into one day, is Ringer factory race cars. That, you could do a whole series just on that, but you should do a video on that, like, just go from like 62 or 64 with like the Thunderbolts and the Max Wedge cars, up to say like 1969, 70 with the Hemi cars.
Yep. Hey, we got
Cobra Jets.
We got a new man in here, Mike Costello. Formal roof Torino Cobra. Well, I'm down with that. I like the formal roof. We have found, Mike, if you go on the channel and search way back on all the videos, we did a formal roof and a fastback Cobra 428 car.
Yep, and I got one coming up on my channel in a couple of weeks.
Oh, there you go. Big Hank, 69 427 Impala 4-speed. Would get it with a 411 gear. It probably would. Oh, just all these great cars. Like I said, you say do modern cars. Me, I'm just going to do every muscle car I could find as long as it fits. The hardest part is, some of these people, especially with the holidays, I'm trying to shoot a certain number of cars, and people are, I can't, my family's in town, it's this. I'm like, who cares about your family? It's this muscle car campy we're talking about.
We got the holiday bourbon behind us.
Yeah. Ooh, did you say holiday bourbon? Nah.
Speaking of that, we're about 4 minutes away from bourbon time.
Any questions? And Dan, you're right. You are 100% correct. Mr. Norm did do the first 383 swap and convinced the engineers that they could do it. Kudos to you. Dan, Dan, we should be good on live with you sometime.
I know, he's a muscle car aficionado.
Yeah. Wrestlers were limited because of the oil pan design, which would starve oil flow during hard launches. They sure tried hard, though. It's just amazing what they did. The only thing they never built, I guess they built two of them, was in the C bodies. I think in 1970 they put 446 back in two cars. It was in all the literature, and they never really made it into serious production.
Did not know that.
Yep. All right, it's 1970. We've got 3 minutes left. What are you buying?
1970. Oh, jeez.
Come on.
1970. I mean, I probably got to go with a 429 4-speed Torino Cobra.
Not a bad choice.
Beautiful design. You can get your hideaway headlights.
That is true.
Classy looking.
But for 70, if you're going to buy a Ford, why not a Boss 429 Mustang?
I've driven them. I'll tell you why, because I've driven them,
Uh-huh.
and I think that 428s are faster for street and general performance. Unless you
had a connection at home in Moody, you could afford all those crazy parts.
you really needed a ton of gear. You had to hop them up, like, but just in stock trim. I don't know. Everybody will tell you the 428s were faster.
Dan Boyd, LT1Z28. Yes, I'll take one of those. Dan again, Mach 1. Yeah, I mean, you know, Dan, I want them all. Dan's. Earlier today, I was telling Revan Evan, I said, you know, I don't necessarily at this stage of my life want that big Powerball ticket. I just want enough to be comfortable. Now I'm looking at all your questions. I want that damn winning Powerball
Yeah, we
ticket.
need a 50 car shop.
I need it.
All that,
I need it bad.
What a great conversation.
Mike Costello, the 70 to 72 Olds and Buicks were very pretty cars. Far nicer than the Pontiacs and Chevys, my opinion. Mike, check out Muscle Car Campy. We got a 442 sitting there, brand a 72. It's my latest video. It's a U-code 455 car, and I did make a mistake in that video with an automatic. It had 250 horse. Oldsmobile did some weird stuff, you know, with a stick. They got a different cam. Couldn't usually get power brakes and more horsepower. I thought they were done by that in 1970, but they weren't. In 72 rather. 72, if you got a U-code 455 with an auto, you got 250 horse. If you got a stick, it was 270. Net horsepower, that is.
Right. Although I will tell you what would give that Cobra a run for its money in my garage
Go ahead.
would be, again, if I had the lotto, would be my 70 B5 blue interior GTX with the 446 pack.
Yeah.
Tell me that wouldn't be a cool cruiser.
My buddy had a bronze one, copper colored one, 446 pack Super Track pack car, 410 gear, air grabber hood, 4-speed, pistol grip. This was in 1979. We just knew it was like a really fast car. It was probably one of double digits production wise. Like 32, I think, is the number I hear most commonly.
Crazy.
And it was just a car that we drove around on. I can always remember him like tightening the header bolts, fiddling around with the dual point distributor,
Right.
and of course multiple carburation. But great stuff.
Great stuff.
Well, guys, thank
Let's
you
wrap
very
up.
much for showing up. Thank you, Revan Evan, for being on the channel. We really appreciate it. You know, it was Revan Evan who convinced me to do Muscle Car Campy several years ago, and I appreciate it. Mike, thank you for watching that 442 video already. We appreciate it. And everybody who tuned in, just love the comments. We're going to try to make this a weekly thing, if not, you know, maybe a week on my channel, a week on his.
Yeah, we'll go back and forth. I think every week or every other week, and you know, we love the comments.
Yeah, whatever. And if you say, hey, Campy, why don't you do a live about this topic? You know, do one about another topic. I mean, you know, again, another topic I want to do one day is, you know, people don't realize is, you know, muscle cars got more horsepower in 1970. You know, they were really the peak of the horsepower, but they also weighed more than they ever had. And with all the emissions controls, they didn't run quite as fast as they should have either, unless you got under the hood and did your thing. But that's a topic for another day.
Yep.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Muscle Car Campy, and thank you, Revan Evan. See you next week.